Let's talk more about this with former prosecutor Dan Schorr and CNN legal analyst and criminal defense attorney Danny Cevallos. Welcome to you both, and thanks for being with me this morning. I appreciate it. Tsarnaev's lawyer, Judy Clark, she's a master at saving clients from the death penalty. If you're wondering about the lives she's helped spared, Susan Smith, who drowned her children. She also represented Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, Eric Rudolph, the Atlanta Olympic bomber, and Jared Loughner, who shot Congresswoman Gabby Giffords. So Danny, I'll start with you. How did Dzhokhar Tsarnaev get such a lawyer?
By being indigent. That's how defendants get the federal public defender. And in capital cases, lest you think that there's anything wrong with the public defender's office, I'm here to disabuse you of that notion. They're the first people I go to when I have a question. And when we're talking about federal capital crimes, that is some seriously rarefied air in the world of federal public defenders. They are eminently and specially qualified. So, with the small pool of federal public defenders qualified to handle this case, once he was declared indigent, in other words, there's evidence that he doesn't have money to hire counsel for himself, then he will be assigned a public defender. And at this level, I have to imagine that politically, on some level, the same way the U.S. Attorney's Office does the same thing, the office selects who would be perfect, or I'm sure she has some discretion, too, in deciding or wanting the case.
So is it safe to say that he hit the jackpot in this case, Dan?
Well, certainly, if you're going to be facing the death penalty, this is the attorney you want. She's had success in the past. She knows how these cases work, and she's handled defendants who are just hated by society in general, and you have to still focus on a jury to get one juror to vote not to have the death penalty.
And she is a champion at humanizing her clients. I want to read something she said during a 2013 legal conference. She said, "The first clear way death cases are different is the clients. Most have suffered from serious, severe trauma, unbelievable trauma. Many suffer from severe cognitive development issues that affect the core of their being." Do you think that could be true in this case, in the case of the Boston bomber?
Well, certainly someone who's mentally well-adjusted doesn't commit an act like this. But in the end, remember, this is different from a regular trial because it's not about guilt or innocence. When you think of a defense attorney, you think of them trying to get a defendant acquitted so they're not convicted. Here, it's all about the penalty phase. It's all about setting the stage for after the conviction to try to convince at least one juror not to sentence him to the death penalty. And she's going to use arguments like that. He has problems in his past. He's under the influence of his brother, etc.
I love that quote because that shows that she is at her core a mitigation specialist. And by that, I mean that she's got her mind already in the penalty phase, which is what her job is designed to do. Tsarnaev might not be served as well by a defense attorney whose view would just be to get a not guilty. I mean, that's a Hail Mary. It's not likely to happen. So I really like that quote by Judy Clark because it really shows where her mind is and where her training is. I mean, after all these years specializing or focusing in this area, she thinks like a mitigation specialist. And that is the penalty phase where you show a jury, hey, this person's life is worth saving.
Well, she's done a lot, too, in her actions to humanize this kid. She's, like, adjusted his shirt as he came into trial. You know, she pats his back. She rubs his shoulder. She calls him a teenager. The problem for her, though, is Dzhokhar Tsarnaev has shown little emotion in court. He hasn't shown one bit of remorse if you look at his body language.
Right. She also refers to him by his American nickname, which is an Americanized version of his foreign name. She's trying to humanize him, and now this is just a preliminary part of humanizing him. In the death penalty phase, you'll see her take it to the next level, calling witnesses to try to humanize him more. And that's what this is all about. Down the road, will he get the death penalty or not? There's so much evidence here, and they're conceding that he contributed to these acts that, of course, he's going to be convicted. Will he get the death penalty? That's the big question.
All right, Dan Schorr, Danny Cevallos, thanks so much to both of you. I appreciate it. I want to bring in Dan Schorr, a former prosecutor, Sunny Hostin, a CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor. So one of the things that's kind of confusing, so this guy's on trial. He pleads not guilty, but his attorney stands up in trial and says he's guilty.
Yeah.
What gives there?
I know. A lot of people have asked me that question. I mean, you know, Tsarnaev's defense team wanted him to plead guilty, but they wanted the death penalty off the table, and the government refused to do that for a lot of reasons. And so I think certainly they started this by saying this is not a whodunit. He did this, but they're in it to save his life, not necessarily to prove him innocent. And I think that makes a lot of sense because Judy Clark is a master at this. If you're facing the death penalty, this is the attorney that you want representing you, but she needs to have credibility with the jury. Given the overwhelming evidence against against Schorr Tsarnaev, there is no way that a defense attorney can get up in front of this jury during opening statements and say anything like the prosecution has a burden beyond a reasonable doubt. You know, they can't prove their case. Keep an open mind. He is innocent of these charges. And so she didn't do that. That was very smart, because now she goes into the penalty phase, and make no doubt, there is no doubt that there will be a penalty phase here. He will be found guilty of these crimes. Now she has that established rapport with the jury, and she can now say to them, I didn't lie to you. He's going to take responsibility. You found him guilty. We knew you would find him guilty. However, there's more to this story.
She's been very sympathetic to the victims as well, and that creates goodwill with the jury.
Absolutely. So in phase two of this trial, when the jurors will decide whether Schorr Tsarnaev lives or die, we'll see many more witnesses for the defense. In other words, we'll see Schorr Tsarnaev's parents, let's say, or other family members.
Right. Any kind of mitigation that you can offer, whether it's influenced by the older brother, problems he's had in his past, if there are character witnesses, bringing them forward. And remember, the name of the game is just finding one juror who won't vote for the death penalty. That's all they need to stop him from being executed. And that's the strategy of the defense from the very beginning. The trial phase gave them a first opportunity to put out some sort of mitigation evidence, but they didn't put everything out there because they're saving it for the penalty phase.
The interesting thing, Deborah, I think, and we were talking about this earlier, Tamerlane's wife, right? Supposedly she had no idea what was going on, totally controlled by Tamerlan Tsarnaev, right? Just as Schorr Tsarnaev was supposedly controlled by his brother. Could she possibly take the stand?
There's a possibility she could. The prosecutors have not brought any charges. Her lawyers have had one key mission, and that is to make sure she does not get charged. So if they can show that Tamerlan had the same effect on her that he may have had on Schorr, but you have to remember that this bomb was built off a side room of the kitchen, right? And somebody said, you know, it just looked effectively like a scrapyard because there were so many different pieces and components. So if she didn't see that, you know, it's going to be kind of interesting what her role is. But there will be mitigating circumstances. They're going to show, and they brought this in, that his life was falling apart. He was failing out of school. His parents were getting divorced. He was reapplying for financial aid, which he was just about to lose. And his college said, no, you don't deserve it. We're not going to give it to you. So
but
there will
be the story studying about 1 million young people in America.
Certainly. And I actually think one of the questions that, you know, everyone's been chatting about is, will he take the stand? And I would imagine that that decision has not been made yet by Judy Clark, because that's what lawyers do. They sort of assess the situation. And once you've been found guilty of 30 crimes, 17 of which will make you eligible for the death penalty, sometimes, you know, you change. And so I suspect that that decision hasn't been made, but I think that is his best chance.
Though, Dan, a Hail Mary? Let's say you're like, you know, you're losing. Last Hail Mary pass, you put your
And we have to separate the
stand?
strategy to put your client on the stand during the trial, and then in the penalty phase. In the trial, it's a Hail Mary because the defendant's going to be cross-examined on all sorts of bad or suspect things that person did. In the penalty phase, we already know if he's convicted, which he probably will. At the penalty phase, we already know that he committed these crimes, and then it's just about trying to get sympathy and, once again, appealing to just one juror to stop the vote for the death penalty.
Yeah, but I'm thinking one question. One question would do him in. You planted a bomb, you killed an 8-year-old boy, and then you went to Whole Foods and bought some milk.
Well,
explain that to me.
It's going to be very difficult for him because we haven't seen a very sympathetic defendant. He hasn't shown any remorse. But Judy Clark has done, I think, a decent job at sort of humanizing him. She's been fixing his tie. She's been sort of rubbing his back. And so, as you say, Dan, one juror, we've got, you know, 7 women, 5 men, one juror that thinks, gosh, this is a young kid. This could be my kid. This could be my brother. This could be my nephew. That is all that it takes, because in a federal death penalty case, unlike other state death penalty cases, you need a unanimous jury. Right. And let's face it, we're in Massachusetts. There's no state death penalty. I remember when I was covering the Connecticut case, that home invasion case, so many people were saying, I'm not in favor of the death penalty, but if anyone deserves the death penalty, these guys deserve it, and they got it.
And when I went into court that day and really thought, okay, nobody's going to vote for the death penalty, but after hearing the witnesses, after hearing how they bled out on the street, how so many people took the stand and said, I thought that was my last day on earth. I thought that was the day I was going to die. And you hear about these crimes, it's very hard. Judy Clark is going to have to convince them that, in fact, he was so brainwashed that he didn't have free choice. That's going to be nearly impossible.
All right, I got to end it there. I'm sorry. Dan, Sunny, Deborah, I know. Thank you so much. I appreciate your insight.